Test Studio by Progress, built with our patented Art of Test framework and Fiddler core. In this episode, random word extraction and passing variables.
In today's session, we're going to be reviewing an old favorite, random word extraction to create contacts in a sample CRM. So this will illustrate the use of test as step capabilities, extracting variables, runtime variables from a live UI, and then using those to data drive inputs, passing the variables from one test to the next. So things that are very common requests that we get. Also, it illustrates the use of a codeless setup routine and a perpetual data option as well. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build out 3 quick tests here. So I'll just start with my add new test for web test, and this will be my basic login. And for this, we'll just go ahead and right click and hit record on the basic login. I already got the URL in here, so we'll just go ahead and choose the URL, or if you're new to that, type the URL in. Personally, I do most of my recording in IE. I can use Firefox and Chrome sometimes, but I find that the element highlighter is best, quickest and easiest to work with, I think, in IE. Personally, that's my decision. But we'll hit record. That'll start the recording process on my other screen here. We'll get it over onto this screen momentarily. Now we're in a live record mode. The recorder is attached at the bottom. It shows that we are currently recording, and we can pause and we can resume recording. We can operate the highlight element or the element highlighter. Also, there's lots of things down here in the toolbar, generally speaking, when we talk about the Test Studio recording toolbar. It's this attachment. This can also be docked and undocked from the browser. Of course, we have the main website body here, and in the background, I've got my Test Studio test already open. It's captured that navigate step that we have chosen, and we're in a live record mode. So we'll just carry out the test. Generally speaking, as a best practice, you want to, don't skip anything. Don't take any shortcuts when you're creating a test. You don't want to do auto-completes. They don't typically carry over from one browser to the next, and we are building cross-browser compatible tests. So make sure you just give it the full information there. Also, you don't need the tab. That is something that we do as users a lot of times, but for test creation part, that's not necessary. And all you need to do is just click into a field and type. We will capture tab keys. They're just extra steps. So you can always leave them in there. They won't really do anything for you. And then, of course, clicking enter versus clicking login. You know, you typically want to use a mouse click instead of a keyboard stroke, just generally for web automation. So those are a couple best practices to point out along the way. And I've got a login. And of course, what good is a test without a verification to prove if it succeeded? So quickly, we'll just create a verification to verify, in this case, that the word logout is visible. And that becomes my verification to prove that we've successfully logged in. Right? That'll also avoid some false positives. Now for this application, there's a JavaScript handler I already know about on the password field. We're going to go ahead and simulate real typing for that, and that will instrument that correctly. So there's our first subtest. And actually this will become our second subtest, but we're going to create another one here, which is to create a contact. Okay, and we'll go ahead and just double click into this to open it up. Now we have 2 different tabs open, and we've captured the majority of this test over here so far. Well, now we're going to continue recording over here. And what I'm doing is basically leaving behind a nice modularized login process that we'll use later on. And we can use in other tests as well using test to step. But create a contact, we'll just pick up where we left off in the recording browser. And this is just going to take place at the bottom here. One thing I like to do when starting into a test that relies on another test, we typically like to start with a verification. So let me just verify before I try to do anything that this element is visible, the new contact button. Ultimately, that's what I'm going to click. So I'll turn off my element highlighter. We'll go ahead and click New Contact. This opens a pop-up in my application. So we'll see the recorder connect to the pop-up. And once that recording toolbar is attached to the window, we'll now be capturing things inside this window as well. Be aware that when you have a pop-up window, you should see a connect pop-up window step recorded. And also be aware that there may be dynamic components within pop-up window URLs. So feel free, if necessary, if you need to be a little bit more generic, you can make sure to use a partial and maybe trim any kind of dynamic portion that might be there. That way we can continue to connect to the pop-up window even though there may be like a dynamic ID that changes at the end. Okay, all sorts of settings and more details you can find in our documentation on that. But for now, we're going to just jump back in here and keep going, creating a contact. And this is where we're going to provide the first name, the last name. There we go. And email address. And we'll go ahead and hit create contact at this point. Okay. Now this is of course my issue with my little application here, but all of the things that we need are accomplished within the test here. So we'll go ahead and close the recording browser here. And that ends the recording for us. So we went through, we log into an application, and then in the next subtest we create a user, opening a pop-up, filling out first and last name, email, which it looks like that did not, oh, that's the click on email. Let's get into the value. For some reason didn't want to capture that, so let me go ahead and add that in here. There we go. And then submit, and then we close the pop-up. So very basic process. What happens after that I really don't care about right now, but this is what I want to show you is actually data driving the first name and the last name with randomly generated names. Okay, and we're going to get those from another test. So now we have a complete process that's kind of spread between two different subtests here. We need one more test to help us, which will be the test that gives us the first and last name. So we'll go over here, we'll add a new test, still a web test, and this will be my random word extraction. Now, of course, you can generate random words, random variables, data sets like that through code. Of course, Test Studio can always do things through code. It's just behind the steps here, but it's typically a last resort. We don't, most of the time, don't need to use code. We try to minimize the code burden as much as possible. So we've got this tooling built out for you to be able to modify and maintain and create these tests as codelessly as possible. This random word extraction represents one of those options. Take it or leave it. Some people like to go through code to do the same thing, but this is a setup routine that I'm going to create. And we'll jump into this test. We'll do record here. Let's see, do I have the appropriate URL? And I don't, but I know where I can find it. I can actually find it in our documentation. In fact, let me just jump back. I'll show you where to find the documentation from the very beginning, which is to start from your help drop down at the top. There's tons of things up here, by the way. Our forums, our feedback portal. If you want to vote on what to do next in Test Studio, please go to submit feedback. That's a great portal. You'll find our developers are in there a lot of times too, interacting with you. Submitting tickets to support, of course, if you need help with that. The user guide, of course, is where I'm heading. So this pops up our online user guide if you haven't used it before, and it is searchable. So for this, I'm going to do an extract, right? So we'll type in extract, and you have create an extraction step. And in fact, as you can see here, there's an example that uses this random word generating website, and that's the actual site that I'm going to use myself. So now I have it. And you can see this is a PHP application as well. So now that I have that, borrowing that from our documentation, we'll come back here, we'll hit record, and I've got a URL to paste in there, and we'll hit record here, and we're off and running. So this is a really basic test. In this test, we're just going to go to this random word generator website. It's going to spit out a word for us eventually. If we want to, we can even do a verification to say wait until this element goes away. So we'll do that in case it takes too long. That's a 30-second timeout to say wait for that loading GIF image to go away before trying to do the next thing. But I have a feeling if I click that generate random word button, it might kick it into gear here. So there we go. So we generate the random word. With the element highlighter, we can go float over that area. And this is a great way to learn something, learn about your application and how Test Studio sees your application. Turn on the element highlighter and float around over the elements of your application, your web page. And I would recommend doing this part in IE. You can do the same thing in Chrome and Firefox, but IE has a little bit better way of giving you some extrapolation of layers when there are certain layers, like a tree or a grid, for example. And I'll show you that. But for this case, what we want is just to float over this. We're looking also, this is a large area that we're looking at, but I want to see in quick steps, does it contain the value I'm after, and only that value? Is there some way I can go grab that particular value? And it is there. So we don't want to verify it. What we want to do is extract it. So down here, when you float over with a highlighter, you've got your verifications, your waits, and extracts. And extract text contains the song, right? Now, the important part to doing an extract step is you are going to get a runtime variable out of it, and you get to name that variable whatever you'd like. So we'll call this random word 1. There we go. But you also need to make sure that where you're extracting your variable from is not using the variable as an identifier. What does that mean? Well, here's the current find logic that Test Studio is using to locate that particular element. And the element in question should be highlighting over here, which is this guy. So currently it is using the ID combined with the tag name. And that is enough information to go find it. Once we find it, we extract its text content at runtime. Well, right now, that is this. What I want to make sure of is I don't want to use this to try to find it, because next time it's going to be different. It's not going to be thushooks, and we're not going to be able to find whatever that is. So when you're doing an extraction, you want to use identification logic that's more generic and maybe more position-based versus those that might be more content-based. Okay, so we've got good logic there. And of course, if it's affecting multiple tests, you can make sure to update all tests that are using that same element across your project. Right? So I just updated all the tests that use that element as well. So we navigate, we wait, we extract. Let's go ahead and just repeat the process here. Let's see, we're highlighting, or we're turn off the highlighter. We'll hit generate random word. Oops, let me resume recording, I suppose. There we go. And so there's our submit button. I could also make sure to do that right after the navigate. It should load the initial word more quickly, but if we want to, we'll just go copy and paste this step, in fact, and we'll drag and drop one of those up above. So we'll navigate, we'll click. Yeah, I guess I'll throw this wait in there as well if we need to. No, we'll do it there. And then we'll extract whatever's there, and then we'll click again, and then we'll extract that again. So we'll just copy paste. We don't necessarily need to go back because we're getting it from the same place. So we'll copy paste that step, and we'll just call this one random word 2. And that's it for my test. Okay. Now, if we were to continue making some steps here against this test. Like let's say we were to, back at the UI level here, maybe go do something else. We'll do quick verification, for instance. You'll notice that the steps that follow extraction in the properties of the test step, at the top there's bindings, and when there's a data source inside the test, you'll see that it lives here. It's in the drop-down. I could actually take what was extracted in step 4 and use that in step 7 or somewhere later in this test. So that's normally how extraction variables become available following the extraction step. So if you have a test that needs to extract a random variable or a dynamic variable or an ID of some kind from the UI at the creation phase, and you want to use that same item throughout your CRUD operation, you can extract it into a variable and then feed that back into that same test later on just by using, by selecting it and setting it, and then you've basically data-driven that interaction, whether it's an input or verification or even data-driven fine logic. But for now, that's all we need from this test. We've created the variables, we've created the login, we've created the contact. So I've got my 3 different components. I'm going to add a 4th test here, and this will be my master. So this will be my master test. And within this test, I will now bring together my subtests. Okay? And this is important because this will allow me to share the data from one test to the next. So first of all, let me go ahead and open up my master test. It's just a blank test here. And using test to step, which is in the common section of the step builder menu up at the top, we can go find all of the existing tests within our project. These are all of my tests in my project. I'm sure I have more than one that's called basic login, but only one in this particular folder that we're working out of. So we'll select that. Oops, I almost forgot to throw in my random word extract, which needs to happen first before we do the contact creation process. And actually before we do the login too. So let me go ahead and get the random word extraction. And of course I've got a few of those as well. But we'll drop that above the login. And then last but not least, our create a contact. Okay, so those are now our 3 different subtests under one master test using test to step. So you can modularize these components, especially things like a login, a log out, and build up many different scenarios from there. Now that we've accomplished that, we can tie these two together. We can take the random extracted data from test number 1 and utilize it in subtest number 3. And the way we do that, it's basically the first part of that is done by having them under the same common test or relating them in some way as sisters or children to each other, akin. And second, we can go into the random contact create, and here is where we're actually going to be data driving the test steps. So we'll highlight the test step in question, and under the bindings properties, you'll notice that there are no drop-down variables here. And that's okay, that's actually natural because there are no variables associated to this test itself. We haven't attached data source to it. There are no extractions inside of this particular test, so there is nothing in that drop-down. But there is the ability here to call out across the tests, across the master test, and say we need random word 1 from that basic or from that random word extraction test. And if I've spelled that correctly, usually what I'll typically do is go over to my test and just copy and paste it out of here, right up this one here. Looks right, but just in case. Yeah, cool. So we've set that, and then on the last name, we'll do the same. Again, This time though, random word 2. And we'll set that. Okay, so now we have a dynamically data-driven contact creation process. We'll go back to our master test. I'm going to turn on annotation here so it slows down the playback. And that also initiates this 400 milliseconds between test steps. That's what that does. And you'll see the annotation as it starts up here, but we'll watch this now. And we'll run this here in Firefox, I suppose. Of course, we'll want to run it across all of them at some point, maybe from a test list. And we'll see how we do. So the annotation is going to show us step-by-step, and also down at the bottom it has a step-by-step as well. So there's our first word, our second word, bonk and ensemble. A couple French words there. Oh, there's 3 it looks like. Now we're in subtest 2. We're logging in. And here comes the simulate real typing for the password. You'll notice it types in each character rather than pasting in the entire string, which enables the login correctly and allows me to log in successfully. Now we'll go into the third subtest to create a contact, and we should see our old friends, the extracted values from subtest 1 as the first and last name. Ensemble, filet list. And voila. So that is how you can accomplish extraction using a UI like this tool here. I've done many of these as well for date calculators as well. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in something like that. But some of our airline customers utilize those very same types of setup routines to go and get dates, calculate 60 days out, calculate 70 days out, extract those, or go get today's date. So there's lots of different things you can do to automate your setup routines, to get your data together in a way that's always going to be fresh, okay? Once I create that random word contact creation process, I can set that on a cycle, if I wanted to, an hourly cycle, and have it create a new random contact every hour, and it'll probably just keep running. I don't know when that would run out, or if that would ever run out of random words to use, right? Of course, it'd probably fill up a database eventually. But lots of different things you can do that really just shows you, I think, a lot of the flexibility of extraction and passing a variable. There is also an article on this, as I mentioned, with the random word generator here that we have in our documentation. We also have, sorry if I can find the appropriate browser window, but we also have a document specifically on the passing of a variable as well. Maybe I'll go ahead and just pull that back up. There it is. And this talks about that as well, using extraction, using test as step, the parent, the child kind of relationship there. This actually talks about exactly what we've just done using that random word generating kind of option there, and essentially how you can pass that from one test to the next. So stay tuned for more. Hopefully that helps you on your journey of learning Test Studio and learning how you can work with the tool and build out some tests pretty quickly and easily. They're very powerful. Thanks for checking it out, and have a great day.